All right, so picture this, okay? Massive factory floor, just like humming, the synchronized whirring of all these machines, right? Producing goods at this crazy pace. Got that image. Now hold on, because here's the twist. Imagine that same factory, same setup, same machines, but the lights are off. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not like a power outage, like on purpose. Because there's almost no people inside.
Welcome to our deep dive, everyone, where we're going to be, exploring the world of China's dark factories.
Yeah, these dark factories, right? We're talking fully automated places, everything, and I mean everything, from the first production steps all the way to the quality checks at the end. It's all handled by like this really complex network. We're talking machines, robots, AI, the whole shebang, and what's the outcome? Well, nonstop work. Productivity on a scale we haven't really seen before. And, gives us this really interesting glimpse into like the future of manufacturing. It does. And this isn't like some far off idea either. It's happening right now.
Yeah.
Our source material, this document called Fully Automated Factories.pdf, it makes it crystal clear. China's at the forefront of this whole thing, becoming a real leader in the dark factory space. So this isn't just some small trend, it's like a total shift, and it's going to have impacts globally.
And that's where you, our listeners, come in, right?
Yeah.
The goal of this deep dive is to give you a solid grasp on these dark factories. We're going to break down how they work, the benefits they bring, the problems they run into, and basically, how they're changing the game for supply chains and labor markets around the world. So think of this as your shortcut to being totally informed on this super cutting edge thing that's happening.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit. China's been known as the factory of the world for a while now, right? Like it's the backbone of global manufacturing as we know it. So how do these dark factories, these factories with barely any humans, how do they fit into that picture? It's kind of like counterintuitive almost, right?
It's interesting because dark factories are basically like the next step in China's dominance in manufacturing. They're not just shooting for being the biggest producer anymore. They want to be the most high tech. And that's where their Made in China 2025 initiative comes in.
Made in China 2025. Yeah. We've heard it mentioned, in the tech world and stuff. Can you give us the rundown on what that plan's all about?
So if we zoom out a bit, Made in China 2025 is a strategic plan. It's led by the government, and it's all about transforming China into a global leader in these high-tech industries. It's about going beyond just making stuff the old way and embracing innovation, digital tech, what they call smart manufacturing, and dark factories. With their heavy reliance on robots, AI, and all those interconnected systems, they're essential to hitting that target.
Ah, so it's not just companies deciding to automate on their own. There's a top-down push for this.
Exactly. The document we're looking at really highlights how big of a role the Chinese government is playing in this. They're actively pushing this change by offering all sorts of incentives, like financial support, tax breaks, favorable policies. All of this is aimed at companies who are willing to invest in automation, robotics, all that smart factory tech. And this support from the government, it's been like a rocket booster for the adoption of these really advanced manufacturing methods.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So the foundation's there. Now let's dive into the details, right? What are the real tangible benefits that China's getting from these dark factories? Why are they going after this so hard?
Well, the advantages are pretty substantial, and there's a lot of them, But right off the bat, one of the biggest is this huge jump in productivity and just overall efficiency. Think about it. These factories, they can run nonstop, 24/7. No need for shift changes or breaks or even any of those, basic human needs. And that continuous operation alone, it just translates to a way bigger output than what you'd get from a traditional factory with a bunch of human workers.
Yeah, the machines don't need to sleep or take lunch breaks. It's a pretty fundamental change to how much a factory can produce.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just running all the time. Those AI systems that are built into these dark factories, they play a really big role too. They're constantly optimizing the whole production process in real time. They're using algorithms, basically instructions, to analyze data from the machines every second and make these tiny adjustments to things like the speed, temperature, material flow. That kind of constant fine-tuning, it's something a human would have a hard time doing consistently, to be honest.
So it's not just doing the work, it's constantly figuring out how to do the work better and faster. What about the money side of things? Getting rid of human labor, that's going to have a pretty big impact on cost, right?
Absolutely. Labor costs are a big chunk of the expenses in traditional manufacturing. So by cutting down on the need for human workers or even totally removing it, dark factories can slash those operating costs way down. And We're not just talking wages here, but also benefits, training programs, even stuff related to workplace safety rules.
Yeah, fewer people equals a much leaner operation. Now, one area where I think machines would really shine is inconsistency. How does all this automation affect the quality of what's coming out of these dark factories?
Well, that's where you really see the precision and the quality control benefits come in. Robots and AI, they're really, really good at those tasks that are super repetitive. And they do it with this crazy level of accuracy. They don't get tired, they don't get distracted, and they don't have that variability that sometimes, leads to human errors. And because of that, you get a much more consistent product quality, fewer defects, less waste for the manufacturers.
So, higher quality, less waste, that's a pretty powerful combination. But manufacturing has to be flexible too, right? Can these super automated factories easily switch to making different products when the market demands it?
That's a good point, and it highlights another big advantage, flexibility and customization. These modern automated factories, they were designed from the ground up to be adaptable. They can be reprogrammed or, have their software and hardware tweaked pretty quickly to make a whole variety of different products. And that ability to adapt quickly, it lets manufacturers react much better to those shifts in what consumers want and just the whole, dynamic nature of global markets.
Yeah, that sounds like a big win in today's world where what people want is changing all the time. But we've got to be real. We've talked about all the good stuff, but what about the downsides?
Yeah.
What are some of the big challenges and concerns around China going so all in on these dark factories?
All right, so this is where we get into some of the bigger, tougher questions, the ones about
Hmm.
society and the economy, right? And there's no getting around it. The biggest worry with all this is what happens to jobs. We could see a lot of jobs lost and some serious disruption in the labor market because these automated factories need way fewer workers. A lot of those, especially the low-skill jobs, the ones that China's manufacturing sectors have relied on for so long, they're at risk of just vanishing.
Yeah, that's a massive thing to think about. We're talking about potentially millions of people's jobs.
Exactly. And while, yeah, automation might create some new jobs in areas like, taking care of robots, developing AI, analyzing data, that kind of stuff. But that transition period could be rough, right? We could see a lot of unemployment in certain industries. And that means it's super important to invest in retraining programs, giving people the skills they'll need for the jobs that'll be around in the future.
Beyond just the impact on people, though, are there any practical roadblocks to setting up and running these really advanced facilities?
There are, and the first one is the money. The initial investment to build a dark factory, it's huge. We're talking a big chunk of change up front for all the robotics, the AI systems, the whole connected infrastructure you need. And sure, those costs might even out over time because of, better efficiency and lower labor costs, but that initial price tag can be a wall, especially for those smaller and medium-sized businesses.
So it could end up making the gap between those big companies with tons of money and the smaller businesses even bigger.
That's definitely a worry. And then there's another big challenge that's a bit more techy, cybersecurity and data privacy. Because dark factories depend so much on all these devices and AI systems that are linked together, they become like prime targets for hackers and cyber attacks.
Mhm.
Someone with bad intentions could mess with production, steal important information, even cause damage to the actual facilities. So having really, really strong cybersecurity and keeping it up to date, that's absolutely essential.
It's like a whole new level of risk where the threats aren't just, people breaking in or something anymore.
Exactly. And then we've got to consider the supply chain itself, right? A fully automated supply chain can be amazingly efficient, but it's also vulnerable in a different way. Like if one crucial robot breaks down, or there's a software bug in the AI, or a hacker gets into a key part of the system, boom, the whole production line could grind to a halt. So building in some backup systems and redundancy, making those automated systems tougher, that's going to be key to making sure things stay stable in the long run.
So there's this trade-off, right? Hyper efficiency on one hand, but potential fragility on the other if something goes wrong. Okay, let's zoom out even more now. How is China going all in on these dark factories, changing things globally, economically speaking? What are the bigger ripple effects?
The global impact is definitely happening already, and it's probably going to get a lot more noticeable. One of the biggest things is the advantage it gives Chinese manufacturers. Being able to make high-quality stuff cheaper and faster, that gives them a serious leg up in global markets, especially in industries like, electronics, car parts, consumer goods, that sort of thing. And actually, get this, our source material points out that in electronics, companies with dark factories have cut down their lead times by like 40%. That gives them a huge head start in markets that change super fast,
Wow, that's significant. That kind of efficiency could really shake up how global trade works.
for sure. And we might see some big changes in how labor works globally, too. Countries that have always relied on having lower labor costs to be competitive in manufacturing, they're going to face even more pressure from China's super efficient, automated factories. And that might force everyone to rethink how global labor relations work and how they approach production strategies.
So other countries might have to invest a lot in automating their own industries just to stay in the game.
That's a big takeaway from all of this. China going all in on automation and making such rapid progress, it's setting a whole new standard for how efficient manufacturing can be. And that's probably going to push other countries to speed up their own adoption of these kinds of technologies, which in turn will drive even more global innovation and development of even more advanced automation solutions. So yeah, it's a technological shift with a really, really wide reach.
It really is fascinating. Looking forward, what do you think the future holds for dark factories in China specifically? Where do you see this whole trend going in the next few years?
Well, the prediction is that dark factories are going to become even more common in China, and they're going to get even more sophisticated. With AI, machine learning, where systems learn from data and get better over time, and with robotics constantly evolving, we're probably going to see even more automation across a wider range of industries.
So beyond just the sectors where it's already happening.
Exactly. And these future dark factories, they're going to be smarter, more efficient, and fit into global supply chains even more seamlessly. They'll probably be able to handle even more complicated tasks, and they'll be able to do it with more and more independence and adaptability.
So it sounds like for businesses around the world, ignoring this whole thing isn't a very good plan.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty clear. The future of manufacturing is tied to automation. For any business, anywhere in the world, understanding what China's doing with these dark factories and figuring out their own automation strategies, that's going to be crucial for staying competitive in the years to come. China's really leading the way in this whole transformation.
All right, so if we want to sum it all up, China's dark factories, they're not just some futuristic sci-fi idea. They're real, they're growing fast, and they're driven by the Chinese government's strategic plans. They come with some big advantages, like being more efficient, cheaper, and producing higher quality goods. But there are also big challenges, especially when it comes to, what happens to workers and making sure all that tech is secure.
Right, and the global impact is a big deal too. China going this route with dark factories, it's already changing how competitive international markets are, and it could change, like fundamentally, how work is done all over the world.
So to wrap up this deep dive, here's something for you, our listeners, to think about. As fully automated manufacturing becomes more and more common, not just in China, but maybe everywhere, what's that going to mean for society and the economy in the long run? What skills are going to be essential? How will we have to rethink how we view work and even the whole idea of industry? It's a huge question, and it's one that's going to keep unfolding for years to come.